Greetings, everybody. This is Marcel Williams here yet again. It's still Friday today. I thought I'd come back on again for another video because I made a big mistake with the date with the earlier video. I had mistakenly said it's Friday the 18th, but it's actually Friday the 21st of March 2025. So just to correct it, it's Friday the 21st of March 2025. I've been talking about Revelations 18 in the previous video, and I just want to take a short piece off again to elaborate more on that scripture. It's so meaty that one has to do it piecemeal. In Revelations 18 from verse 4 and 5, I'll just read it for you and I'll explain a few things related to that. Revelations 18 verse 4 says, "And I heard another voice from heaven." This is to John of Patmos, who's writing the Revelations. "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not her plagues." Verse 5 goes, "For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities." Now, just to remind you, in the previous video, I pointed out the viewpoint that Mystery Babylon is actually the United States of America, and I gave some information there that gave evidence of it, how the Bible also describes it as such. Now, this part here is saying after, the previous part about, Babylon is fallen, etc. It goes on to say here in verse 4, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her." So actually, if we interpret this, it means then that the revelation is that God is saying to the people to leave America, to come out of her. And the main reason is that so that they may not be partakers of her sins and her plagues. In other words, there's going to be consequences for those sins. Now, I just want to pause a bit on those sins, because it says here in verse 5, it says, "For her sins have reached unto heaven." Now, what are these sins that we're referring to? Remember, in the previous video, I showed that America parades itself as a bastion of democracy and freedom, and that everything is right, and they are the spiritual leaders, or they sound the spiritual health of the world in terms of the way they see things, but in actual fact they are guilty of sins. So what are these sins that I'm referring to? If you go back into history, you'll notice that when the settlers came into America, they subjugated the indigenous peoples. In other words, there wasn't open lands there where there was nothing. We even see when we were young, when we saw the Western movies, where there was a lot of shootings going on with what we called the Red Indians. That's not their name, but the Europeans gave them the name of the Red Indians, which everybody adopted. They're actually the Native Americans, or they can be also seen as the indigenous people of America. And so their lands were taken away from them. They were actually tricked out of territory, etc., and they were subjugated, and many of them suffered, and they were put on these reserves. So those of us that know about apartheid in South Africa during those years, where it was separate development, where people were put into different regions and different sections of cities, where separate development took place, we also had some form of reservation. So the native peoples, or Americans, indigenous Americans, were placed in these reserves apart from the main development that was taking place in the cities. And then another sin that they're guilty of is the slave trade. Remember in the early years of America, in fact, in the previous video, I indicated that the Civil War in America, basically part of the reason was for the fact that there was a difference of approach towards the enslavement of these black people that were brought from West Africa in the 1800s. So slavery was quite a crime and quite a sin, because the people were cruelly dealt with, and they were, subjugated and were made slaves where they didn't have any rights, any control or say over their families. Families were separated, etc., and it was very cruel. Those are sins that go into the record books, although things go on today as if it never happened. And then there's what we call the Jim Crow laws. I'm not going to elaborate about it, but if you are interested and you want to research, you'll find out a lot of cruel practices were perpetrated during those times. Then there's also, in a more modern time, the selective approach towards black Americans, in terms of, there was a lot of police shootings and cruel treatment and biased treatment towards African Americans, brutal in many cases, and even we could even mention the justice system. One of the anomalies about the justice system in America is what it was is slanted in favor of the people that are not black, but it's slanted towards the white people, because you'll find that in America the majority of the population is white, but the African Americans are one of the minorities in America when we look at the population, the populace. And the point here is that being a minority in America, African American men form the majority in the prison system of America. Now, why is that so? How come a smaller group have greater representation in the prisons of America? And then there's also the sin of that's come far back, what we call homosexual and lesbian movements. America took the forefront in the world in terms of perpetrating and promoting those practices, which we more modernly refer to as the LGBTQ plus community. And then there's the large-scale practice of abortions. These are sins, despite what people say. I'm going to have to say it here, and I have to stand by my words, that it's a sin. It's murder of children, and I know there's people who will differ with me on that one, but the facts are that it is so. And the problem also is that these policies, these ideas were not only kept in America, but were promoted and exported to other countries, to the point of persuading other countries, even through funding, etc., to adopt these laws of so-called freedom. Africa was approached mainly also, and to persuade and to adopt same-sex marriages, for instance. Just to give you a example of my personal experience just recently. Just yesterday, I was driving past the gardens in Cape Town, the city of Cape Town, the gardens there. And near the gardens, at the point of the gardens, is a cathedral. It's the name of the cathedral is St. George's Cathedral. And as I took the corner, at the robot stop street there, I saw a huge flag of the multicolored rainbow flag flying in front of the church. And immediately I made the association that then the church, the cathedral, this branch of Christianity was in favor of that practice and that movement. In other words, they stand for it. Now, that's just one example, and I thought I'd like to bring it to this video this time, so that you can see in practicality that it's all up in our faces around us. The many parades, the pride parades that are taking place worldwide, and as well as in the city of Cape Town. So just for now, I'm going to leave it at that, just to point out that there are repercussions, there are consequences for such sins, because it says here in verse 5, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered iniquities. And then, the rest of it goes there from 6 down to 8 and even 9 about the repercussions, which I will deal with at another time. So just for now, something for us to ponder about and think about, those points about this issue, that sins even of the past will be visited to us even in modern times. There's no such thing as time where God is concerned. Time is a human construct, so even if it happened in the 1700s and the 1800s in history, accountability will be executed. So again, I wish you a great weekend ahead.